What do you get when you mix Wall Street hustle with Airbnb muscle? You get Mike Brockway, who is today's guest who made a calculated risk to leave his financial job to get into the world of real estate investing. After trying a few different methods like most real estate investors did, he ended up landing on his niche as luxury short-term rentals. He does not only just own some of these, he also manages for quite a few people and has built an entire business out of this. Mike will break down how he was able to get his capital for luxury properties going up, the smart investing tactic that helped him scale fast and keep some of that cash, and the top features that make a luxury Airbnb stand out and how to exactly bring them to top of market. If you've ever dreamed of turning high-end stays into high-end profit, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Bigger Stays, everyone. My name is Garrett Brown. I am the BiggerPockets resident STR expert. We have another expert in the field today on Mike Brockway. Mike, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on. You're going to be speaking at BPCON, actually 25 this year in Las Vegas, and I've been fascinated by your story and how you've kind of transitioned from the financial world to a full-time real estate investor now. So how did you kind of get your itch into real estate investing, and when did you know that it was kind of time to, make a move in that direction?
I'm definitely looking forward to BPCON and excited to get on stage finally. My background is in financial services, and I quit that job January of 2017. At that point in time, I had a couple properties. I started off house hacking, doing some co-living. Right before COVID, beginning of COVID, I jumped into short-term rentals. And then from there, higher cash flow, I was able to kind of start buying properties a little bit faster and move into more of like the luxury space as far as properties here in Denver.
What drew you to short-term rentals from some of your initial investing strategies? What kind of draw your attention there?
I had actually avoided short-term rentals for a long time. The one property I had when I first launched it as a short-term rental, I actually interviewed a company to do the management for me. And after kind of seeing the management fees and what my take home would be, I decided to run with it myself. But really, it was just the amount of cash flow you can get from putting something on Airbnb. And obviously, that's changed over time. I was going for low door count, high cash flow, and that was the name of the game for me. Especially when you're starting off, I only had so many properties, so I wanted to really maximize the returns that I could get, even if it was a little bit more active on my part.
That's great points for people that are listening, because a lot of people, they automatically think like, oh, I get a short-term rental, I definitely have to hire a property manager. And, that's just the way that it goes. And, everybody's path is different, but I always recommend people to at least self-manage their first property, if not their first couple, just because you need to learn. It's a lot easier than people, maybe 5 or 10 years ago because of all the software out there and automation tools. But now it's one of those things that you need to actually know what goes into it to know if your property manager is even worth what they're charging. And a lot of the times it might not be the case for you. So, that variance is something I always recommend for people. You took a little bit different approach to it, sounds like, instead of, a lot of people, they get door disease basically where they're like, oh, I just need every door I can get, let's slam one. I need 50 doors by the end of the year. But you seem like you took it like less doors, but higher return on that. So what was your philosophy with that, and what kind of put you into that strategy in comparison to other ones that are out there?
I think for me, I've always had a goal of doing what I was passionate about and like living a good life. And the more doors you have, the more problems you have, the more toilets you have, right? More things that just come up. And I'm also in a pretty expensive market out here in Denver, Colorado. So it wasn't necessarily possible for me to really stack doors and buy a lot of properties. And so every single deal that I did, I just wanted to do the best deal possible. Obviously, you learn from the first one, you graduate to the second one, the third one, and so on and so forth, right? I wanted to, again, just be able to utilize the cash that I have, the equity that I had, and again, pay for my living expenses. And that's kind of the cards I was dealt out here in Denver, and I just made it work.
Let's dive into your first property that you acquired. What was your strategy behind it? Did you buy your first property, or was it an arbitrage unit, or you purchased it?
Yeah, the first property I purchased, I was back in 2015. And so it's been a pretty slow and steady game for me. That was my first property I ever purchased. And again, I was just going for price per square foot, honestly. I was like, okay, if I can get a big house and have a lot of value, I can have roommates and rent rooms out. And that's, again, I started off house hacking before I even knew what house hacking was. And so I bought a 3,000 square foot house up in Westminster, Colorado. Had a couple of roommates. Once I had that third roommate in there, my expenses were paid plus some. And that's when the light bulb went off. I was like, okay, let me do this again. And instead of a single family house, I went to a duplex. And I had my own unit, I had two properties then, and I was still making more money by having both houses, but also having my own space at that point in time. So I kind of graduated up into a duplex from a single family house hack.
Do you still own those properties today?
I own one of them, the duplex. The first one I sold, I never want to sell properties in general, but this property I sold to actually 1031 into a bigger property at that point in time. And I actually sold this to my sister. She's also out here in Denver, Colorado. This was her second home she's purchased, and she really liked it. Once she found out that I was selling it, I was actually under contract, and she wanted to buy it. So I got out of that contract, sold it to her, and she still owns it to this day.
Nice. Keeping it in the family. I like it. How many units do you own now that are currently short-term rentals?
I have 13 units total, and 9 of those are short-term rental units.
Out of those 9, which one, if you had to pick, I don't want to say your crown jewel, but maybe like pick one that you look back and you learn from other mistakes to make a good deal, or you just meticulously went about it a certain way that you knew everything going into it that you were actually going to come out with before, some of your past mistakes that I'm sure you made.
Yeah, I think there's 2 deals that come to mind in particular that were moments of, I guess, fear, but also opportunity. I think the first one, I think it was my third short-term rental, and it was just in that million plus price point. And I just was never comfortable with that. I just always wanted to buy like the lowest cost property, maybe in a good neighborhood. But this was actually one of the most expensive houses in this neighborhood. So it kind of goes against some of the things you hear seasoned real estate investors say. But at that point in time, I had learned about short-term rentals. I was better at running the numbers. I had more confidence, more cash flow coming in. And I was working with a really good realtor. And I always tell people, like, if you're getting started, don't just work with the first realtor you meet. Interview realtors and find a realtor that's actually doing the thing that you want to do, and they're actually crushing it, right? And they're going to set you up for success, and they're going to be a trusted resource for you. And so because of this realtor helping me run the numbers and finding this property in this neighborhood that was able to be licensed, again, that brings in some predictability there as far as safety goes. The mayor in that town, she actually owns short-term rentals, so even more confidence there as far as the longevity. Ended up buying that property with a 5% down jumbo loan. So I was super low money down, and then I put about $50,000 into furnishings, and it does about $150K a year of revenue. After I did that one, and I spent a lot of money on furnishings and went to like more of the, I guess, again, the luxury route, that just was a big confidence boost. And then from there, I was more comfortable with those expensive properties, maybe those bigger group homes, and also putting a lot more money into furnishings and design.
You said a lot of very valuable things that I want to unpack, and we'll start with talking about the specific agent, because I tell people all the time, like, I've been a real estate agent for 8 or 9 years, but before I got further into short-term rentals, if you'd have asked me anything about it, I would have probably said, yeah, I can help you with it. And I knew nothing about that. You're basically interviewing agents to see what their credentials are to work with you on this very niche thing. And you also mentioned like regulations and things like that. That's something that most generic real estate agents would never even process in their brain when you're thinking about a new purchase for you. And then the other thing I want to dive into and just maybe get some clarity from you is you mentioned you got a 5% jumbo loan. What exactly is a jumbo loan for the audience, and how did you kind of come across this loan product to say?
I would say this also plays into some of the mistakes I made starting off. I always thought that I had to put 20% down, and that's just what my realtor told me, right? But I then realized I didn't work with the best realtor on my first transaction. So once this is my third short-term rental. And at this point, I was trying to buy properties as fast as possible and not wait 2 years until the next one, right? And so I started looking into different loan products, and a couple of different realtors turned me on to low money down loans. And previously I had done one that was I think a 3% down loan product on that duplex I mentioned previously. On this one, same approach. How can I buy, a better property, more expensive price point, but also put less money down? And typically jumbo loans are a little bit higher down, but they were just one of the lenders I worked with. And again, coming back to real estate agents and lenders, you also want to shop your lenders too, because lenders will have different loan products and they'll just have different knowledge. And so one of my lenders brought this to me and she said, hey, this may not be around for a while, but I think we can get you qualified. And just barely got qualified for this loan. A jumbo loan is anything above conforming limits, and that depends on your state. In this case, this was a $1.1 million house. So the loan on that at 5% down would be a jumbo loan, and just lucked out and got approved and was able to keep only put 5% down, which gave me more money for amenities and furnishings to make this place great.
Great advice for people too, because that is like a common myth within real estate investing that you have to have 20%, if not more, to get into a property. But even my most successful, I call it a land hack, but where I purchased a house with a bunch of land on it, I got into it with a 5% owner occupied loan and then was able to build all my cabins and things on it. So it goes back to working with a qualified investor friendly lender that understands the different products that are out there. You'll be shocked when you talk to a lender of like, hey, how can I purchase this home? And they'll give you 7 different options that you probably didn't even expect, were, DSCR loans and XYZ that are out there that may work for you. So I love the creative stance you took there. So now you're at about 9 units right now. Are you self-managing all of those units? Do you have a property manager on any of them, or how is that kind of working for you?
Yeah, I'm self-managing all my units, and I'm also doing some co-hosting for 6 other properties. And that kind of just happened over time via word of mouth.
Yeah, okay, so they all came from referrals then, because that's the one thing I hear people get discouraged with co-hosting is, how do I find somebody that has them? And yours came from just referrals and putting yourself out there?
I like to go to networking events and meet new people, and I've been in Denver for about 10 years now, so I have a lot of good connections out here. And first one came from a friend of a friend. I actually helped my friend Kyle, coached him up a little bit on buying his first short-term rental. He saw what I was doing, and he wanted to do it. He wanted a piece of the action. And so I helped him get his first short-term rental. Fast forward a couple months, we were at a barbecue at his place, and one of his friends also wanted to buy a short-term rental. He saw us doing it. This guy was in solar sales, but he had really no interest in doing it all on his own. He wanted to bring the money in. He wanted to get a piece of the action, but he didn't want to manage it. He didn't want to furnish it. He didn't want to manage the rehab. And so I was like, hey, as me being who I am, I was like, all right, I'm happy to help you out. Let me know if you have any questions, whatnot, right? And eventually the conversation came down to me doing the management for him. And that was my first short-term rental co-hosting client. So I managed the light rehab, referred my designer over to him, helped with the install, and then now I manage that property today.
That sounds like kind of barbecue I need to go to, backyard deals and network, and I love to hear it. So and that came from a lot of you, self-managing your early properties and really kind of getting your licks in with the short-term rental game, because it is not always a straight arrow pointing up for every time you're doing this. There's peaks and valleys, and if you've been in this since before 2020, you've seen quite a few different peaks in this. So there's a lot of people probably listening to this that are maybe we're in a similar place to you in 2015 or 2014 when you mentioned you kind of started getting the itch for real estate investing. So what are some actionable tips for somebody that is currently working their job but also interested in possibly purchasing their first short-term rental, besides working with a highly qualified agent and lender that understands that space? Where would you point them in the direction to get success with that first path?
I would say just put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to talk to others doing it and those people that are doing it well. Most investors, at least the ones you'll find at meetups, they want to help everyone else. They see the path. They're on that path. They might be a couple steps ahead of you, but they want to help people, get to where they're at and see success as well. So just don't be afraid to reach out to individuals at meetups, online forums. You can certainly go through some coaching programs and whatnot, but you don't necessarily have to spend a bunch of money to gain knowledge. And then start networking with the realtors we mentioned, the lenders we mentioned. They're making money off of you doing a transaction or you doing your first deal. So they're also going to help you. And then ask them the same questions like, hey, who do you know in your certain city, in my case, Denver, that's crushing it in short-term rentals, or that's doing whatever your investment strategy well. And then you go talk to those individuals. I used to do a ton of I used to call them informational interviews. Just get on a call with someone, buy someone lunch. You obviously ask your questions, but I always ask them at the end of that conversation, like, hey, what can I do for you to help you move forward in your business? Or who do you want to meet? You can be a super connector for someone as well and add value and even find a partnership that way, right?
Great advice. I would tell people closed mouths don't get fed. And if you're not telling people exactly what you're doing, then why would people be aware of it? And you think of your immediate sphere, people think of like, oh, like my immediate family and just my really close friends, but it's actually anybody that's in your contact list or anybody on your social media or your Facebook profile from high school. Like there's a ton of ways, even like I've had a couple co-hosting deals that I do that were from a friend of a friend, similar ways that just by me telling people exactly what I do, it's brought a few deals my way. So, and I think we're in similar boats that like we manage, I manage 9 rentals now. I own 5 of them and then have 4. And I constantly try to, improve my systems and, improve my team. And what would be your biggest tip for making sure that you have the same standards across all your properties and, are able to build out the operations there, so people don't get overwhelmed when they're thinking in their bigger picture of, what if I have 6 or 7 rentals one day? How could I even manage that? I'm sure there's some help that you've had along the way to figure these things out.
I think number one is just create consistency across all your listings if that's possible, right? They might vary as far as size and location, but try to create some sort of consistency and just boost that guest experience. Then as you're kind of tiptoeing into the co-hosting world, if you're doing this for others, I have a few kind of non-negotiables for owners when I have the conversation. And one of those is the ability or the willingness to invest in your property as needed, right? If it's not performing well, or if it doesn't have amenities, or something needs to be upgraded or repaired, that owner has to be willing to fund that upgrade or that repair. And this way you're able to keep that guest experience high. That's a couple of the small ones I would say to start with.
Especially when people are starting out, now that, you've built up a business quite a bit and you're able to be a little more selective on the properties you're taking. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there sometimes that they just need to get into a deal to find their first co-hosting client, and they'll learn a lot through that path, but it may not be a home run every time. Sometimes you just need a small base hit to get on base and kind of learn through the systems and ropes that you have there.
And that's another good point, the systems too. Make sure your systems are dialed, and start doing something before you really need it. You might only have a couple of properties, but you can still build out that SOP or that system and start utilizing it. So when you're ready to bring on that 3rd or 4th property, that 3rd or 4th co-hosting client, it's already there. It's plug and play. And always be improving on those things and getting it more dialed in. And there are so many softwares out there and so many different things to choose from. But as long as you're using something and you're good at it, it's better than maybe leaving that out.
That's very valuable advice. People, you'll see them, they'll just keep acquiring properties like gangbusters and they don't get their systems in place. And it's a lot harder to do that when you have 8 or 9 instead of just having, 1 or 2. And you need to be over prepared for what's coming. So that's great advice for anybody listening. Where do you see the short-term rental space kind of going in your future? Do you see any big trends happening in your area, or is it pretty much the tried and true methods of, nice, clean place, bigger, to accommodate larger families, and you're kind of sticking to your bread and butter? Or is there something out there that you're maybe trying to experiment or test on your next, adventure that you're working on?
I think for me personally, after that one property I mentioned to you, I did a couple more in the meantime. And then I recently did one that sleeps 20 people. It's a 4,000 square foot house. It has a pool, added the hot tub, added the fire pit, added all the amenities. You walk into the backyard, it's like a brewery. Like you feel like you're at a commercial space almost. I think I want to move into something maybe a little more creative. I've maybe not necessarily hit a ceiling, but that's like my monster home, or that my biggest property sleeps 20 people. It should do like $225,000 in revenue before expenses, of course. But I'm trying to figure out what's next. Maybe incorporating some smaller units into my portfolio. I have a lot of properties that sleep a lot of people. So I have 2 other homes that sleep 16 people, and that's been a good strategy for me. But how do I now take that portfolio and make it, I guess, less risky? Do I want to do some smaller units that also could work as long-term rentals? Do I want to get into something that's less expensive than these $1 million properties I've been purchasing? How do I take my real estate and make it less risky? Because as you know, short-term rentals, there's ebbs and flows in the game. And so how do I be prepared and set myself up for success over the long run?
Awesome. Yeah, no, we'll be definitely expecting a lot of creative things to come from you. And I'm sure your portfolio and concepts that you came with kind of speaks for themselves. So as we kind of wrap up, and, we'll link your information in the description, and we can't wait to have you at BPCON going even more in depth into this kind of conversation. But, you quit your job to get into real estate investing, correct?
Yeah.
So when was that turning point where you knew it was time to actively start moving towards like, all right, my W-2 job is not necessarily suiting me anymore. I'm ready to dive in, full into real estate investing? Because I think a lot of people are leaning towards that way. They just don't know, from somebody that's done it, when exactly they should be doing that, because it's always going to be fearful. So what's your tips for somebody in that?
It all comes back to your scenario, right? I was single, no kids, and it was much easier for me to say, okay, I'm going to take this big risk. and pursue this new venture because I want all the things like the time freedom and the lifestyle that comes with it. And so for me, I think any of these strategies that you can build alongside your W-2 or your main source of income are awesome, right? You can start a co-hosting business. You don't have to own a ton of real estate. It's an easy way to get in. You can do that for the most part with a day job. And once you feel comfortable that your revenue coming in from that is going to allow you to make that leap. And again, very hard to say, like very case by case what your risk tolerance is. But I probably did it a little prematurely. I was in my second property. My living expenses were super low. I had two properties that were basically cash flowing, and I was living for free. So if you can even incorporate some of those different strategies like house hacking or co-living into the approach, and then the icing on the cake can be the revenue from maybe a co-hosting business, I would just get creative and get scrappy. And that was my secret to success over time.
That's exactly the kind of, attitude that we like to embody here at Bigger Pockets too. Like, especially in different times when we can't predict the real estate investing future. Sometimes you need to be creative and mix a few different approaches. So I think everything you've said today is really enlightening for people to hear, to, balance these type of, fears that they have, that I'm sure you were nervous as hell to be leaving this job at some point, but that's when you sometimes have to make that leap. And I'm sure you're definitely appreciative of everything you did in that time too. So we'll link you in the description below. But if anybody wants to reach out to you and chat anymore or ask any questions, where could they find you, or where's the best place to contact you?
I'm most active on Instagram. And then my name is M Brockway 120 on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we appreciate it. And then, we'll be looking forward to hanging out in Vegas at BPCON in October. So we'll make sure to hopefully see a few of the viewers there. If anybody's there, come talk to us, and we'll have a great time over there. Mike's going to be giving out some super valuable information along with Luke and Beth, who were just on the show as well, too. So, we appreciate you jumping on today.
Thanks so much.